we came to the U.S. on July 11th, 2001. So it was 4 days before my birthday. And my 13th birthday was the saddest affair that you can imagine, especially during that time. You know, you're a teenager, you have hormones of all sorts, and you're coming to a new country, and it was sad. It was my most memorable birthday by far. So it was just 4 days after we landed. We stayed with the host family, so it was, there were a man, a woman, and they had 2 kids, and one of their children had his fiance living with them as well. This was in a 3-bedroom house in the middle of St. Louis Park, Minnesota. So they took us in, so that was 4 other people, and then a week later, my aunt and uncle came with their family, so they lived with us too, and another Bosnian family that also came on the same flight as my aunt and uncle stayed with us as well. So we had 4 families, so 17 people living in a 3-bedroom house, which is hard enough in itself. But these were the only people that we knew, and it put a strain on our relationships. I mean, it was very difficult. All of the kids slept in the same room, which was the family room in the basement. So we didn't have beds. I mean, it was very uncomfortable. And we stayed there for a while because while we were looking for apartments, every landlord wanted to know your credit history. Well, here we are coming to the US, you know, just weeks before. Of course, we don't have any credit history. So we stayed there longer than anticipated with this family. And then once we moved, we took the other Bosnian family with us, so now 8 of us were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And it was an apartment that wasn't particularly nice. They were the only apartment in that city that did not require a credit history. So it was filled with immigrants, lots of Somalis, lots of Ethiopians, a lot of Bosnians, because those were the most common immigrants at that time. Like, for example, we didn't have a car, so we got bus passes, unlimited bus passes. None of us knew how to use the bus system. We didn't even know where the bus went or which one we had to go on, and of course we didn't have a computer or internet to look it up, so it was useless. I mean, you have resources, but if you don't know how to use them, then there's no point. And I remember we tried to go to McDonald's with my aunt and uncle and the other family, and because there was a bench near our house that had an ad, and it had an arrow and it said McDonald's 2 minutes away. And we thought, you know, we're in America, we have to try this. I hear McDonald's is, you know, the epitome of American food. It's just a silly thing, but we saw on the bench it's only 2 minutes away, so we started walking. And it was far. You know, we kept like looking around, like, is it here? Like, where are we gonna see it? Not realizing that everything really is measured in, you know, driving time. So that was one of like the first things that was just a really funny memory in my head. But then going to the grocery store even, we asked people that lived in the building, you know, where the grocery store was, and they were like, oh yeah, it's close, it's about 15 minutes away. Said, great, which direction? And we started walking again, and it was about 4 miles away, and we had no idea. We thought we were lost. There were no maps. So it took us maybe 2 hours to find the grocery store, and then once we got the groceries, I mean, we're carrying gallons of milk, really heavy stuff, and then having to walk back, and again, got lost. Took us another 2 hours to get back. So things like that were difficult, and they're things that you wouldn't think about. I mean, they're basics, getting your food, you know, and then even getting to the grocery store and seeing all the options, it's overwhelming. I mean, you go from not having any food, from just relying on rations of bread and powdered milk and nothing else, to then coming to a US grocery store and just having 10 different kinds of butter to choose from and not knowing, what the difference is between the 1%, the 2%, the 4%. I mean, they're very, very small things, but when you compound all of them, it makes for a very stressful time. My parents struggled a lot. I remember talking to them about it, and they felt so helpless and so dependent, and the fact that they were using me as a guide was really, I don't know what the right word is, but it didn't make them feel great. And then in school, I had a little bit of an easier time because I did have this basis of English that I learned. I still didn't have any friends because, again, at age 13, kids don't really want to reach out to a weird foreign girl that is wearing hand-me-down clothes and, speaks in a funny accent. It's just the nature of kids, which was fine. So I joined sports. I started playing volleyball and basketball, and I was really tall, so I was a good addition to the teams, and that's how I started making friends. So it was that forced friendship through sports that kind of helped me get through. And I think if it wasn't for that group of friends that I had, my life could have turned out a lot differently. Like my friends' parents really did a lot for me and still do. I could have not gone to school. I could have gotten a job in a factory. Things could have been a lot different, yeah.
After a long waiting, my father finally got the visa, got the permission, so I was extremely excited to come, and also for the first time to meet my father, because he came back to the United States before I was born, so it was 12 years I finally get to see my father, and also come to New York. My father at that time, he operates a laundry business all the way up in Harlem, 148th Street and 8th Avenue. And I don't know what's Harlem. So when we finally settled down, we moved in and lived in the back of the laundry. Back then, that's how it operated. The front is the store front, and then the family lived in the back. And then I arrived on the 13th of November, and then 2 weeks later we celebrate Thanksgiving. And after Thanksgiving, he said, you need to go to school. I said, sure. So school PS90 is just right around the corner. He took me to the school and registered for the school for the second semester, because then you're running into the Christmas holiday time frame. And they look at my age, look at my papers, that the boy's 12, he goes to 6th grade. Now, second semester, 6th grade, that means in a matter of 5 months, I'll graduate from grade school. I said, wow, that's, for a kid that doesn't even speak English. So we just start learning ABC in Hong Kong for me. So I thought, wow, this is great. I have no clue what's going on. On top of it, PS90 is right in the middle of Harlem. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that I'm the only non, well, back then is, black, right now is African American. I was the only one that's non-black in the whole school. That's going from the student, the janitor, the teacher, the principal, everything. When you are different, you're the only one. You tend to stand out, and everybody treat you in such a way that they make you feel that you are someone special. And so I have no problem getting along with everybody, and they kind of go out of the way, try to help me, which is good. The bad part is being the only one that's different. You can't get away with anything. You're getting, something happened, the teacher come around and then say, well, who did it and whatever, everybody's a Chinese boy, then you got no place to hide. And so, I lived through it, and it was a great memory. Then, then you learn how to get along with people, because, I look back, even then I said, gee, a month ago, I'm in Hong Kong, it's 99.99% Chinese. I'm home, I'm majority, and here I am. I'm the 0.00001 in a minority. Not really at that point at my age, the understanding actually the blacks are also the minority. So I'm the minority of the minority, but yet I have a great time. It only proved one thing, that kids are kids, and we really don't know the difference between different race or whatever. It's all how we educate them, how we taught into them, that later, people form their own conclusion. But as a young kid, I'm very happy playing with my friends, and, they are my friends. And so, and those are the things that kind of wasn't a shock. Once you get over it, okay, I'm living in an area in New York City, and this is where they live, so I'm part of it. I guess in my younger life, I learned to accept the fact that they are all different type of people. So I think in the long run, it kind of helped me to learn that at a young age, and kind of carry with me, so that a lot of times things happen. I do have a different perspective of how do you interpret this individual's message to you. Is it a negative or positive? Or really that is because he or she is ignorant about your background. And so I take an extra look at it to make sure that I know what is being communicated to me, and I think this sort of helped me out in my life to deal and going around with people and working with people. I don't have any problem accepting anything.
My mom comes from a long line of educators, female educators. My grandmother was a principal and my mom was a principal, and she was studying for literature. She was doing her PhD right before the revolution happened. So the idea that she could come here and we could have access to really good education and be a part of the American school system was a big bonus. So she really wanted us to have opportunities. So when we first came here, none of us spoke English, and my mom really wanted me to learn, and this shows how much of an educator she is. Someone came and knocked on our door and said, a church group came and knocked on our door, and we're not religious at all. And even if you were to say if we had any association with any religion, it would be we're culturally Muslim. But when I was really little, one of our neighbors came and knocked on our door and was part of this church group and said, would you want to sign up your daughter for Sunday school? And my mom heard the word school. I was like, yes, definitely. Like, send her. So I started taking the bus to go to Sunday school, and I remember sitting in this room, and they passed around a basket to collect donations, and someone passed it to me, and this little girl passed it to me, and I remember looking really confused and like, what am I supposed to do with it? And she ended up having to have the teacher come and explain it to me. But I think that was the first moment when I realized, like, I have no idea what's going on, and she's little. She doesn't understand that it's a language barrier, that I am coming from a completely different culture. So she didn't really like me at the time. And so I remember having experiences around that. And I think that was the first time when I realized, like, I'm an other. I'm an outsider in this system, in this situation. And it helped me. It definitely helped me with learning English. But I think especially the first few years of going to school, I realized whatever I'm going through is not what everyone else is going through. That 4-year-old, 5-year-old over there is not doing the same thing. My mom, in the beginning, when I started going to kindergarten, would have to sit in the back of the classroom because I was really scared of just being in the room by myself without her. I think the thing that's interesting about my childhood and the way my identity was formed is I'm the only one in my family that was raised here. So my parents in their 40s all of a sudden had this little kid who was the one that was for the first time asking, can I go to a sleepover? Can I have a play date? Can I have a birthday party? Things that they hadn't really had to experience with my siblings, who in Iran had like 30 cousins they could go and stay with. But we grew up very much in isolation here. When my siblings had this huge network of friends and family and loved ones and cousins and everyone that they had, and I grew up within the system, had it much easier, but then emotionally and within my identity, I think it was a little bit more difficult because I grew up with these parents who had just basically lost everything and were having to start all over in their 40s, and who were starting all over alone in a country where there were no other aunts or cousins or brothers or sisters that they had as support. So they had to kind of go through understanding how to raise this kid in this Iranian American context. What's the idea of like having her go and sleep over at someone's house? Like what's like things that we understand. Packing me lunch was like a big deal when I was really little, because it was like, if I bring my food, it's very ethnic, it might smell funny, kids make fun of me. Like, can I have peanut butter and jelly sandwich instead? It doesn't really identify me as coming from this home that's very different from theirs. For me, all of a sudden, the U.S. was somewhere that I was much more comfortable than they were, and I was often like at 8 having to translate things for them, and like we'd go to anywhere, to my school or go shopping or anything, and I'm the person that's kind of being the go-between for my parents, and any if the person at the store, or when like going to the DMV and I'm my mom understands English really well, and but she has a thick accent, and a lot of times here that meant that people assumed she didn't understand, and that somehow also affected her intelligence. Even though my mom, she was like studying for her PhD, she's incredibly smart. She's one of the smartest people I know. So also seeing how that discrimination played out, and then being 8 and having this role of being a little bit more responsible and supporting our family on this level. Most of my childhood we spent moving across the South, whether it was the Southwest or the Southeast. We moved schools regularly, even in the same city we would move. So I was constantly the new kid at whichever school I went, and I was constantly like the new kid, and at times I was like the new kid that wasn't American, like the only other in the classroom. So that was really interesting. It made me stronger. By high school, I felt like I could go into any situation, and after a while, you know, like the cool kid at the school and the nerd and all the different labels that kids put on each other in school, those kids seemed similar no matter the school I went. So like I could come into any system and kind of have a quick way of understanding it. And that's definitely helped me in a lot of ways. But it also meant that I could see the connections between these people in a way that they wouldn't, because the labels really limited them. And that I could see beyond the labels, because I demanded that people saw beyond my labels. You know, I had a very short amount of time to quickly assimilate into any school, into any classroom. In 6th grade, was when I was naturalized. I remember my parents took me out of school and I had to go in downtown, and I had to sit in this room and I had to decide how I wanted to spell my name on my citizenship certificate, if I wanted to include a middle name or not. And then afterwards we went out to lunch and we, you know, my parents were like, okay, here you go. And it was kind of like a celebration, a moment where it was for them in particular. Now looking back, I can understand why they were like this, but when I was growing up, I think because of the trauma my parents had gone through, and then the fact that in the 80s when there was a very strong anti-Iranian sentiment, I was little, but they were dealing with it much more regularly and they also were much more conscious of it. We would go into any setting and we would play this country of origin game, so people would come up and they'd say, you know, where are you from? And my mom would be like, oh, you know, I live in this city, whichever city it was. And they'd be like, no, but really, where are you from? Because of her accent. And we, you know, we look like we didn't belong in that city in particular. She would then say, you know, guess. And then they would have to go through guessing. But she wasn't ever willing to easily give up the information that we're Iranian. And if we were in a space where there were other Iranians, you know, my inclination would be to just go up and start talking to them in Farsi and be like, hey, it's great to see someone else from our community. But hers was always this apprehension, like she wouldn't willingly give that information. And I think later on I realized what was going on at the time. So when my citizenship finally came through, it was this feeling of safety and stability, particularly for my parents. It was like, no matter what, we're here, and there's not a possibility of us having to go back or us having to find a new place to set up, basically. I think before they became citizens and then I became a citizen through them, I think before that there was always a concern that they would have to maybe start all over again somewhere, or that there'd be a threat of them having to leave altogether. And I think in particular for the Iranian community, for those who went through the revolution and then came here and had to settle in a country that was very much in the middle of this political tension, similar to now, but even worse, when you know, people are taking the song like the Beach Boys song, and it's, now the words are being changed to like bomb, 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 bomb Iran, and things like that. They had a very different experience, and so that naturalization process was huge for them. In a way that me as a 6th grader, I was like, great, I have this certificate and I get to go to lunch and I got to get it out of a day of class.